What would be most useful for you in our conversation today?
All right, so I am going through two difficult things right now. The first thing that I'm going through that's difficult is in the logical reasoning section of the LSAT, and that is with statements that are similar. So which one is most like the statement that you see? So it's usually with the conditional statements.
Right. Okay. So you're referring to parallel reasoning questions.
Exactly. Yep.
Okay. A couple of things you can look for with those. One is matching the degree of certainty in the conclusion. So if you're
Okay.
saying always, never, most of the time, or rarely, or if they make more moderate statements like sometimes or many times. So you want to match how strong the language is there.
Okay.
Another thing you can look for is the category of things they're discussing. So rather than saying all people, they might say all people who take the LSAT, which is qualifying or limiting the group of people they're talking about. So you want to make sure that those groups are matched appropriately. You don't want one saying all people who take the LSAT and then a parallel statement in the answer choice that says all people, period.
Hmm.
That would not be equivalent in scope. So look for those things and look to match those.
Okay. Another big thing that I'm struggling with is the inferences on logic games, specifically for whatever the reason, when it comes to matching games. I'm just having a tough time deciphering when it's appropriate to make multiple diagrams, when it's how to get from, the given rules to more complete and complex inferences.
Yeah, that's a tough question. It's a common one. There's no easy answers on that. It really does come from just doing lots of games, looking at explanations, redoing the games, and reviewing them. But one guideline I can give you is if you see an especially powerful variable, that could be your guideline or the guiding light to help you get a sense of where you might make those inferences. Or if you have, for example, a block of variables that takes up a lot of space, the varying placements of that block could be especially limiting and lead you to only a couple of main diagrams. How many
Okay.
games have you done up to this point?
I've done quite a few. I've specifically focused right now on the matching games because that's where I'm having the most difficulty. I feel pretty confident with some of the other game types, but matching is one of the ones where the diagramming and just making those inferences is giving me the most struggles.
Yeah, I would also suggest that for some games, there may not be a lot you can do up front. For the games where you can make those multiple main diagrams, it's awesome because it just opens up the game for you. But many of the tougher games aren't like that at all. And there's very little you can do up front, and you'll be doing a lot more work over the course of the game. So just recognize that that's a possibility too.
Okay. Now my next test is coming up on January 5th, 13th, January 13th. I've been really focusing right now on the logic games because that's where I struggled in my previous test. How do you recommend balancing the three sections so that I don't lose what I had already had on the previous two sections?
Yeah, well, I would never suggest doing only one section at the exclusion of the others entirely, especially with less than a month till the exam. A lot of what you're doing should be full length exams and review. So you're not really leaving out any section at all, period.
Okay. Okay. So full length review. How many up to coming up, leading up to the exam? How many more exams do you recommend that I take?
I would say on average, one or two per week.
Okay. Full length time test.
Yeah.
Okay. Okay. And what other strategies do you have for? I know in one of your videos you had discussed in the reading, kind of going through and doing the questions that are more general before leading up to the ones that are more specific in the passage. But is there a kind of way that you recommend to make the ones that are multiple passages, like the A and B, kind of doing that so that you're not losing what you got in the first in A and then reading the second one and then having to read A and B again?
Yeah, that's a trickier one. And there's not really a great similar strategy for that one because most of the questions will refer to both passages. So
Hmm.
I might suggest if you do a quick scan and you see that some questions only refer to one of the passages, you could read that passage and knock out that question before doing the questions that refer to both. But
Okay.
there is a lot more hunting and scanning for the dual passages.
Okay. And right now I have the prep test 62 to 71, and I also have some of the 50s. Are there any specific games that you know off the top of your head that you recommend that are really on the more complex side, or specific tests that I should really focus on that would be key to honing in on some of the skills that we're discussing here?
Absolutely. Yeah, I have a list of curveball games that I can send you. And those are
Okay.
basically the toughest games that have appeared on the LSAT in general, from exam number 1 up to present. And so that will cover the ones in the 50s, 60s, and 70s as well. There's a lot of value to working on those, because those especially are the types of games where there typically is not a ton you can do up front, as we were talking about. And they can throw you for a little bit of a loop where you're really taking just a couple of rules and holding them in your short-term memory and applying them over the course of the game. So I'll send you a link to those.
Okay. So if I do find, let's say it's test day, and I find that I can really, I look through the 4 games, I can find I can only do 3 of them. How do you recommend distributing, like how do you recommend approaching that? Is it better to attempt the last game at all, or to focus that time on the 3 that I know that I'm capable of at least making diagrams and answering the questions to the best of my ability?
If you were making the decision given to only do 3 games, you might consider doing only the orientation question of the 4th game, because that one
Okay.
typically is a little bit of a gimme. There isn't that much you're doing up front to figure that out. So maybe you want to knock that one out also. As for the
Okay.
remaining 3 games, how you distribute time, it's really based on whatever you need. Games are not of equal difficulty. And so if we take 35 divided by 3, that's about 12 minutes a game. But maybe some games will take 14 minutes and others would take 10, and that's fine.
Right. Okay. All right.
But
Because
what's your goal score?
My goal score is to be right in the 160s. Hopefully, so my first test was in the 50s, and I'm hoping to get up a couple, 10 points or more, and try and get that to 160, 165, somewhere in that range. I would be really quite happy.
Okay, well then I would encourage you to practice with that decision in mind on your diagnostic tests, on your tests leading up to the January LSAT, because you may find that leaving out an entire game puts too low a ceiling on your ultimate score.
Okay.
Because think about how many can you get wrong in reasoning, how many can you get wrong in reading comp, while still excluding an entire game and still let you end up with a 160 or 165. You may end up needing to do all 4 games. I'm not saying it's impossible to get the 165 without that, but it's tough. So see how high your accuracy is on reasoning and reading comp. You may end up realizing that you do need to do all 4 games, because it's easier to perfect games than it is to perfect the other sections.
Okay. All right. With the reading, I also find that I'm highlighting a lot, and I know that you said that that's something you don't necessarily recommend. And I find that I'm also highlighting things that generally don't come back at all. So like, maybe in the reading itself, there's a highlighted or italicized word or something, and I find that I'm highlighting it, making marks in the text, and it's just not being used. So do you have any suggestions on ways that I can kind of simplify my highlighting, but still get to the main point quickly, without using a lot of time and still having a good sense of what's going on in the passage?
Yeah, I mean, it's not really about the vocabulary, and it's never really about the topic either. It's about the structure, how they go about making their argument. So I wouldn't pay too much attention to all the details. I would just note where they are mentally, so you can go back and find them when you need to. And I personally don't love the digital LSAT highlighting tools either. So you may try it out, but it can be a little bit unreliable with the degree of precision that it has. So I would test maybe not making any annotations on the passage itself, but instead jotting down a quick note or 2 on your scratch paper.
Okay. Now, this is a law school application question.
Sure.
I've found that I have 4 sources that are writing letters of recommendation. And one of them, so 2 of them are from attorneys. I worked at a law firm over the summer just until the holidays, and 2 of them are from professors. Is there kind of a balance that you recommend, like 1 and 1, or should you, if you only given 2, do you recommend 1 attorney, 1 professor? If you have 3, is there kind of a better way to do it, or is that kind of up to what they say or how well you know them?
Yeah, I would prioritize how well you know them and how confident you are they'll write you a great letter. So if you could rank on a scale of 1 to 10, your prediction for how strong the letter will be, drop the lowest one. So maybe you have like 2 9s, 1 8, and 1 7. Drop the 7, submit the other 3. I would have a slight bias in favor of academic letters over the work experience letters, but that's the only other input I would have.
Okay. And then also for applications, do you recommend, like for personal statements, do you recommend dovetailing kind of what you told the people in the letters of recommendation to discuss, or do you recommend going completely separate route?
That's a good question. I think that it depends on what messages you want to send in your application. If there's 5 different things you want to communicate, you may not have space to have a lot of overlap between what's in one area and what's in another area. On the other hand, if you only have 2 or 3 major points you want to communicate, then having some overlap is okay. Just don't be a perfect repetition. So maybe there's something that you allude to in your personal statement, but then one of your letters of rec goes much deeper on that topic, or vice versa.
Okay. That's a great point. All right. And just like final thoughts, do you have any major strategies? I know that you sent a great 1-month study plan that has a lot of great information and tips and places to go and look for resources and such. But do you have any, last kind of final thoughts on preparing in this last couple of weeks before the exam? Anything that should really be a place of focus and attention, or is there just, anything that you have to give?
Yeah, sure. So in the final month, I would really emphasize properly simulating test day conditions. So being really strict with yourself, doing those full-length 5-section timed exams, no pausing the clock to go to the bathroom, and mirror everything as closely as possible to what it will look like on test day, even down to using the same test day snacks that you'll eat on the day of the exam itself, or taking the practice tests at the exact same time, or going and seeing your test center and seeing what it's like if you can. So everything you can do to mimic the experience will reduce your stress and maximize the predictive quality of your practice tests now and set yourself up for success.
Perfect. Excellent. That's really, I think, some great strategies. I know that in this, last couple of weeks, I'm really going to focus in again on those logic games. So if you have any other materials that, I know you're always making good stuff and putting out good content. So I'd love to have it. If if you're sending out emails, definitely keep me in mind. And this was definitely very helpful.
Definitely, Zach. Glad to hear it. Before we sign off, what would you say is the biggest insight you got from our call today?
I would say number 1 for sure is making sure to use the practice materials that we have and going through and reviewing everything and doing it under time conditions for test taking. I think that's something that I haven't done enough of is simulating the test conditions. And that's something that I'm going to do going forward.
Awesome, Zach. Well, please keep in touch and let me know if I can help in any way as you move forward.
Great. Thank you again.
Thanks for tuning into the show. Please subscribe if you haven't done so already to be notified of new episodes as I release them. And feel free to reach out if you need anything at all as you move forward with your prep. I'm happy to help however I can. In the meantime, I'll wish you all the best and take care.